Your mind isn't broken. It's just been trying to survive in a world that didn't always feel safe. There are moments, quiet, almost invisible, when you drift away from reality without even noticing. You're sitting alone, maybe doing nothing in particular, and suddenly you're somewhere else. In a different life, a different version of yourself. You're saying things you wish you had said. Living moments that never happened. Winning arguments you lost. Receiving love you never got, and for a while it feels real, it feels comforting, it feels like home. But then reality returns, like cold air slipping through a cracked window, and you're left with this strange emptiness. A quiet question echoing in your chest, why do I do this? This isn't just daydreaming. This is something deeper, something quieter, something more personal. It's what psychologists sometimes call escapist imagination, but that phrase doesn't quite capture the emotional weight of it, because this isn't about creativity. It's about absence. It's about something that was missing, and the mind learning how to replace it. Think of your mind like an empty well. At some point, maybe in childhood, maybe later, something essential wasn't poured into it. Validation, safety, affection, being heard, being understood. Maybe you grew up in a home where your emotions felt like a burden, or where silence was safer than honesty, or where love existed, but only conditionally, so your mind adapted. Because that's what it does. It doesn't wait for the world to change. It builds its own. And slowly, quietly, it started creating scenarios. Not randomly, but with intention. Every imagined conversation, every alternate reality, every perfect version of you, is filling a gap that reality left behind. That argument you replay in your head, it's not about winning. It's about finally feeling in control. That imagined relationship, it's not about fantasy. It's about experiencing the kind of connection that felt out of reach. That version of you who is confident, admired, understood. That's not delusion. That's a blueprint. A reflection of who you needed to become to feel safe. But here's where it gets complicated. Because the mind doesn't just create these scenarios. It starts to prefer them. Reality becomes unpredictable, messy, disappointing, but in your imagination, you control everything. No rejection, no awkward silences, no misunderstandings, no pain unless you choose it. It becomes a controlled world, a safe world. And over time, this safe world becomes your emotional refuge. This is what some psychologists describe as micro-trauma adaptation. Not one big, obvious wound, but a series of small emotional cuts. Moments where you felt unseen, dismissed. Not enough, not chosen. Individually, they don't seem significant. But together, they shape how your mind learns to cope. Instead of expressing, you imagine. Instead of confronting, you rehearse. Instead of living, you simulate. And the scariest part is it works. It actually works. Because for a few moments, your nervous system calms down. Your heart feels lighter. Your mind feels like it finally has control over something. But there's a hidden cost. Every time you retreat into these imagined scenarios, you reinforce a silent belief. Reality is not enough. And slowly, almost invisibly, an invisible wall begins to form between you and the real world. You start hesitating in real conversations because your mind is used to perfect ones. You overthink interactions because you've already played out 100 possible outcomes. You feel disconnected, even when you're surrounded by people, because none of it matches the emotional intensity of your inner world. It's not that you don't want real life. It's that real life feels underwhelming compared to the one you've built inside your head. And that can create a quiet kind of loneliness. The kind that's hard to explain, because technically, nothing is wrong. You're functioning. You're present. But emotionally, you're somewhere else. This is also deeply connected to something called as ambiguous loss. It's the grief of something you never fully had. The love that almost existed. The validation that was inconsistent. The version of life that felt like it was just out of reach. And because it was never fully real, you can't fully grieve it, so your mind keeps recreating it, hoping to finally resolve something that was left unfinished. It's like reading the same chapter of a book over and over again, trying to change the ending. But the ending never changes, So you keep imagining new versions, better versions, kinder versions, safer versions, and somewhere in all of this, you start losing touch with what's real and what's imagined, not in a clinical sense, but in an emotional one. Your expectations shift, your standards shift. Your sense of self becomes tied to who you are in those scenarios rather than who you are in reality. And that creates a quiet identity conflict, because in your mind, you're expressive, confident, understood. But in reality, you might feel quiet, hesitant, invisible, and the gap between those two versions of you starts to hurt. So what do? You escape again. Not because you're weak, but because your mind has learned that this is the safest place to be. This is what happens when emotional needs go unmet for too long. The brain doesn't just sit in that discomfort. It builds alternatives. It creates emotional simulations where you finally get what you needed. It's not a flaw. It's intelligence. It's adaptation. But adaptation doesn't always mean healing, because while your mind is busy creating a world where you feel enough, your real self is still waiting, still carrying the same unmet needs. Still hoping that one day, reality will catch up to imagination. And maybe the most painful part of all this is the realization that the person you are in your imagined scenarios, the one who speaks freely, loves deeply, stands confidently, isn't fake at all. It's you. Just a version of you that never felt safe enough to exist out loud, and that raises a question that most people don't want to face. What if you're not escaping into a fantasy, but escaping into a truth that reality never allowed you to live? And if that's the case, then the problem isn't your imagination. It's what your imagination had to replace. And once you see that, once you truly understand why your mind keeps pulling you away like this, you start to realize something unsettling, something quietly profound, that maybe this isn't just about daydreaming. Maybe this is about something much deeper that has been shaping you for years. Something that doesn't just live in your thoughts, but in the way you see yourself, the way you connect with others, the way you exist in the world. And once you begin to notice it, you can't unsee it. Because it changes the way you understand every quiet moment, every imagined conversation, every version of yourself you've ever created in your mind, and it leads to a realization that feels almost too heavy to hold, that the life you've been rehearsing in your head might actually be trying to tell you something about the life you've been avoiding. And the more you avoid it, the stronger that silent distance becomes. Not all at once. Not in a way that alarms you. But slowly, like emotional erosion, you start missing moments without realizing it. Conversations feel harder to stay in. Your attention drifts, not because you don't care, but because your inner world feels more engaging than the one in front of you. You begin to respond less, speak less, risk less. Because in your imagination, there is no risk, but in real life, there always is. And so, without meaning to, you begin to shrink your presence in the real world. You hesitate before expressing yourself, because it never comes out as perfectly as it does in your head. You hold back your thoughts, because you've already lived a better version of that moment internally, and over time this creates a quiet kind of regret. Not loud, not dramatic, just small, accumulating moments of, I wish I had said something. I wish I had tried. I wish I had shown up as myself. But the truth is, you were never taught how to feel safe doing that. Your mind gave you a place where you could practice being yourself without consequences. But somewhere along the way, practice became replacement, and that's where the pain deepens. Because the more you live internally, the harder it becomes to feel fulfilled externally. Real relationships start to feel lacking, not because they are, but because they can't compete with something that was designed to be perfect. And this can quietly affect how you connect with people. You may find yourself feeling misunderstood, even when others are trying. You may crave deep connection, but struggle to stay present long enough to build it. You may expect others to intuitively understand you, the way people do in your imagined scenarios, without realizing that real connection requires something your inner world never had to face. Vulnerability in real time. Messy, imperfect, unscripted vulnerability. And that's terrifying when your mind has spent years protecting you from it. But here's the shift, the one that changes everything, if you're willing to see it. What if your imagination was never the problem? What if it was never something to fix or get rid of? What if it was actually evidence of emotional intelligence, of depth, of a mind that refused to let you feel empty, even when reality did? Because the truth is, your imagination didn't betray you. It protected you. It gave you language when you couldn't speak. It gave you comfort when no one noticed your pain. It gave you control when everything felt uncertain. And maybe it gave you a glimpse of who you really are beneath all the fear. That version of you in your mind, the one who expresses freely, who feels deeply, who connects without hesitation. That's not a fantasy. That's potential. But potential was never meant to stay inside your head. It was meant to be lived slowly, imperfectly, and in pieces. And this is where healing begins, not by forcing yourself to stop imagining, but by gently asking, what is this scenario trying to give me that I'm not allowing myself to experience in real life? Is it confidence? Then, maybe it starts with one small, uncomfortable sentence spoken out loud. Is it connection? Then, maybe it begins with being a little more honest, even if your voice shakes. Is it closure? Then, maybe it's about accepting that some endings won't come from others, they'll come from you. Because every imagined scenario carries a message, a need, a truth, and instead of escaping into it, you can start translating it. Bringing pieces of it back with you, not all at once. Not perfectly, but enough to slowly close the gap between who you are in your mind and who you allow yourself to be in reality. It won't feel natural at first. In fact, it might feel wrong, because you're stepping out of a world where everything was controlled into one where nothing is. But that's also where something real can finally begin. Because real life doesn't need to be perfect to be meaningful. Real conversations don't need perfect words to create connection. Real you doesn't need to be flawless to be worthy. And maybe, just maybe, the goal was never to stop imagining. It was to stop believing that your imagined self is out of reach. Because it isn't. It's been waiting, quietly, patiently, for you to give it permission to exist outside your mind. And that permission doesn't come from confidence. It comes from courage, small, fragile, trembling courage. The kind that says, I don't feel ready, but I'm willing to try. And that is enough, more than enough. So the next time your mind pulls you into another scenario, don't push it away. Pause. Listen. Ask yourself what it's trying to show you, and then, take one small piece of that world and bring it into this one. Speak one sentence. Take one step, show one honest part of yourself, because healing isn't about leaving your inner world behind. It's about no longer needing to hide inside it, and slowly, gently, learning that the life you've been imagining was never meant to stay a dream. It was meant to become a direction, a quiet map leading you back to yourself. So if you've been living in your mind more than in your life, if you've been creating worlds just to feel something real, you're not strange. You're not broken. You're someone who adapted beautifully, in ways no one ever taught you how to. And now you're someone who gets to choose something different. Not all at once, not perfectly, but honestly. And that changes everything, because one day, without even noticing, you'll find yourself less in your head, and more in your life. Less rehearsing, and more experiencing. Less imagining, and more becoming. And when that day comes, you won't need those perfect scenarios anymore. Not because they disappeared, but because your reality finally started to feel enough. If this story resonated with you, if you saw pieces of yourself hidden between these words, then you were never alone in this. And maybe this is the moment you begin to come back.